Okay, so welcome back to another week of What's What with Klutz. This week is going to be talking about dishing perfectionism in your training, which, if you're unaware, is one of the big philosophies that I like to embody in my coaching. So, if you're a runner, or most athletes that I know, you're probably pretty type A with perfectionist tendencies. And in this podcast, we're going to go over 4 reasons why you should ditch your perfectionism in your training and why it will benefit you. So, a little background. I was very perfectionist and type A back when I ran in college. Um, so, my coach would give me a training plan, and I would literally do everything that it said to the T. It didn't matter if I felt bad or if, like, when you run a loop and then it's a little shorter than you think. So then I would add on that extra mileage to get exactly to what he told me. So, like, if he told me to run 12 miles, I would run until I hit 12.00, which I know is really common in the running community, especially with Strava and everything we have. And I think it's human nature to just like those round numbers. There's something about 12.00 versus like 11.93, not entirely sure why. Um, but I don't really know psychology that well. So I'm sure there's something that explains it. But I have dealt with this a lot, and I thankfully never had anything really detrimental happen because of it. But I did have some struggles with eating in college, which I know contributed to my perfectionism and feeling like I needed to do everything perfectly or exercise every day or else I'm a failure, which I'm not going to talk about much in this podcast, but that did play a part in my perfectionism. And if you relate to that, I am sorry that you had to go through that too. It sucks. But I think a lot of us are just perfectionists in general. And I feel like it has a lot to do with just thinking if we don't do something as prescribed, we're going to fail. And that's just not true. So I do want to say that I'm not by any means saying that following a training plan exactly is a bad thing. Um, it worked for me pretty well in college. It works for a lot of people. But when I was in college, I didn't really have that much going on compared to training now. And I could devote large chunks of my day to my running and my recovery. Um, and I wasn't working like an 8-hour a day job. So I really built my work and class schedule around my practices and had a lot of downtime. Versus now I work, the normal Monday through Friday, 8-hour day, which that in and of itself is pretty tiring. And then, as you know, I'm a coach, so I do that outside of those hours. And then I'm also training on top of that. Plus, I own a house now. I am in a committed relationship. I have cats. So there's just a lot more going on now. And if I hung on to my perfectionism, I think I would just set myself up for failure in my training because it's not super realistic for me to always be able to do what is planned on a piece of paper that doesn't really know what's going on in my life. And especially as an adult, one day at work could be extra stressful, and whatever's planned for that day for training didn't take into account the work stress. So you might have to alter based on that. But if you're trying to be quote unquote perfect, then you're going to struggle altering your training. So let's get into the actual reasons why you should break up with your perfectionism before I go on some more tangents. So, number one is your perfectionism is not serving you. Usually, when we feel like we need to do something perfectly, it's coming from a place of fear and not a place of trust and abundance. So, for me, whenever I felt like I needed to do my training plan perfectly, it came from a place of fear that if I didn't do my runs as my coach said, then I would not progress as a runner and I would not be a good runner, which is total BS. Um, and approaching your training from a fearful lens doesn't set you up for success in the long run. It sets you up for resentment and burnout. And there are so many different ways to train for events that, especially when I was in college, every woman on my team, we had the same training plan, and that I think worked fine. I can't really say because I don't know how my teammates were doing other than like their results that in the races. But I can't tell you like how they felt except for the ones I was close to. But we were all individuals running on the same plan, and even though the plan was specific to our team, um, I don't I don't know if it was the best for all of us to be doing the same exact workouts and the same volume and all of that, for example. But anyway, that was a little tangent too. Um, your perfectionism isn't serving you. So, like the example I mentioned before, like think about a time where you had a hefty training week plan and then shit hit the fan at work. And a lot of people just push through and force themselves to train at that high level that they had previously planned anyway. And if that was you, how did you feel during that week and afterwards? Like looking back, did you take longer to recover? Did other parts of your life suffer, like your sleep, your nutrition, your relationships, maybe your work? Your other activities, your family, you know, and did the benefit of completing that training outweigh the negative? And in most cases, I believe the answer is no. So I saw this a lot in my own training for the 50K this year. There were some weeks where I planned to do higher volume than actually happened, and I altered to complete a lower volume that would still help me achieve my goals, to account for the life stresses that I was dealing with, like buying and renovating a house and moving and working 2 jobs. So perfectionism isn't serving you, and it's okay and pretty awesome to alter your training plan. So reason number 2, you should ditch your perfectionism, is perfectionism doesn't know your body. And what I mean by that is it doesn't know how your body is responding to the training. It doesn't know how you feel on a daily basis. It just knows some numbers written down on a paper or in an app that say you should do a certain thing. And one of the things that I try to instill in my athletes is that their most important tool is the ability to know and listen to their body. And if you're more concerned about being perfect, then you're going to ignore any signals that your body is sending you about your training, your recovery, your motivation, anything like that. And in the worst cases, not listening to your body can lead you to injury. And I'm not saying you should never push through a hard workout or run because you're in pain. Like sometimes running just hurts and you got to push through it. But I'm saying you shouldn't push through it just because you're worried about not being perfect and you're just worried about hitting a mileage number or a time on feet number. You don't have to do everything perfectly in order to succeed at your goals. And taking some days off at the first sign of a niggle can prevent something small from turning into something that causes you to take weeks to months off. Okay, so number 3 reason you should ditch your perfectionism. Consistency matters more than specific runs. So perfectionism usually comes with an all or nothing mindset, which means if you can't complete your entire run or workout on a given day, you're more likely not to run at all. And sometimes there is a time and place that you should skip a run completely, but just like the previous reason, the time and place to skip a run is not because you are afraid of not being perfect. So throughout your running career, it won't matter if you cut one or a couple runs or workouts short. What matters more is that you get out consistently and build your cumulative miles. So for example, in my training, I trained for 6 or 7 months for my 50K, and in that time frame I ran somewhere between 600 and 700 miles. And I did cut some long runs short, but let's say I cut 50 miles off of my total cumulative mileage. That's really not that much overall. And I still got out for those runs. I think there was only one time I skipped a run completely, and that's because I got my second vaccine dose and was completely dead the next day. So that's a good reason to skip your run. But those other times I still went out for a run. I just didn't go as far as I had planned. And would it have helped me in my 50K if I had stuck it out and, you know, completed those runs as I had planned? Maybe, but my goal was only to finish it. I didn't have a time goal or anything, so I knew cutting my long run short would still allow me to finish my 50K and it wouldn't affect that goal. And I also thought that spending extra time on my feet during those really stressful weeks would do more harm than good for me. And I actually think that worked out pretty well, because if you're new here, I was dealing with some plantar fasciitis since about February, and it never got to the point where I had to stop running, but it was kind of just annoying, and usually it hurt more after my runs than during. During it didn't really affect me, and it got gradually worse as I got closer to my race, but I think I balanced the pushing and the knowing when to back off enough that it didn't flare up so much that I had to skip like an entire week or even skip my race entirely. So I think that is a testament to not being perfect, because if I tried to complete my plan as I wrote it, then I might have pushed too hard and become injured. Okay, so the final reason that you should ditch your perfectionism is, I know a lot of you out there are using generic plans, and there is nothing wrong with that, but those generic plans are made for the masses. They're not made for you. And because of that, they're not customized to you and your life and your schedule and your priorities. And I don't think that using a generic plan is bad in any way. I've done it many times for races. But if you try to follow a generic plan exactly as it's written, that's where you might get into trouble. And usually the reason we're trying to follow a plan exactly is because we're trying to be perfect, and we think that is the only way we'll reach our goals. So, like I said, generic plans can be great. They give you a framework that you need in order to train for specific distances, but like I said, they're not created with the structure of your life in mind. So it's up to you to alter that plan to fit your needs. And whenever you have a training plan, I believe that the training plan should fit into your life. You shouldn't fit your life to a training plan. And if you're stuck in perfectionism, you'll try to fit your life to the training plan. And in some cases that might work, but I've also seen many cases where it doesn't work in your life. And when that doesn't work, you feel like a failure and you feel like you're the problem. But you're not the problem. The plan just isn't for you as it's written. And where I've seen this a lot is for those who don't work a typical Monday through Friday job. Most mass plans assume that you will do your long runs on the weekend, but if you don't work Monday through Friday, that might not be possible for you. And it gets a little tricky to alter that plan to have the long run on, say, like a Wednesday or a Thursday, and not knowing how to alter the other days to go along with it. So, if you do choose to use a generic plan, flexibility and adaptability will serve you much better than your perfectionism will. So, those are the 4 reasons that I think you should ditch your perfectionism. Um, Long story short, train hard, but give yourself grace, listen to your body, and remember that consistency is always better than perfection. And ditching your perfectionism will set you up for more years of loving running, reduce your risk of burnout and sometimes injury. And yeah, just remember that running is a long term sport. And in order to be in it for a long time, you gotta keep enjoying it. And shit's gonna happen in your life. So sometimes you just gotta roll with the punches and do what you can. And that is perfectly okay. And you are still an amazing runner. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Um, it means a lot to me to be able to talk about this. And I hope this message gets to a lot of people, especially women, because that's who I've seen it the most with in most aspects of our lives. But I hope this helps someone. And yeah, just be nicer to yourself because you're awesome and you're doing great. Even when your training doesn't go to plan for extended periods of time, you're still doing great. And yeah, just stay consistent, friends.